Welcome back, everyone. This is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, here with another hero breakdown video. And as requested by one of my subscribers, I was asked to do a couple of the free-to-play or commanders that are much easier to get without having to spend money. And considering this is literally one of the first ones that you get, I thought this would be a good place to start. Without further ado, I will be breaking down this commander in my usual 4 steps, going over their skills, what you'll usually find them doing, a good talent tree build for them, and what commanders you compare them with to get the most out of them. And with that, let's get started. First off, I will state that Liam is about as basic of an epic commander that you can get. This is not necessarily a bad thing. He does what he does very well. And being he's the first commander that you get in the game, and you get a lot of free stuff for him, relics, experience, and the like, it's very easy to get him awakened early on, and it's very useful to go ahead and do that, especially if you're a free-to-play player, because he does remain pretty helpful for a lot of the early game content. Now, first skill, deals direct damage to a target for 6,000. Very straightforward, not a heavy hitter, but a decent amount of single target damage without a lot of investment. Now, he's not going to hit as hard as some of the AoE commanders that you're used to, but as far as single target damage, I believe he has it in the bag. John does 6,600, but if you've heard me talk about siege commanders at all, you'll know why I don't particularly like this commander. And there are some other commanders that deal single target damage with debuffs, but Liam, very straightforward. I'm going to do 6,000 damage. Second skill, equally simple to understand. Increases squad attack by 15%. This is kind of nice that it's not dependent on any particular troop type. Being as he's the first commander, for a while you're not going to be able to field a march of any one troop type. So having a squad attack of 15%, regardless of what troops you bring to the field, makes him viable until you get full marches of single troop types, which takes quite a while, honestly. Skill number 3, honestly my favorite skill for him. The unawakened version of this, and I'm skipping this because I know the awakened boosts it. Squad basic attacks have a 10% chance to heal lightly wounded squads by 1,800. That's a pretty substantial heal for it being a passive skill. Just as a frame of reference, Edward heals for 3,600 on his active skill, and that's his primary function. Liam heals for half of that without being awakened. There's no timer on it, so this 10% chance could go off every second. It could not go off for 20 seconds, but when it does, it makes a difference. After Liam's been awakened, it ups to 2,700, which is a pretty solid amount for an epic commander. The heals do make him a viable early game tank. If you don't have anything else, he can take quite a few hits with this heal factor and still come out on top. Last skill, when garrisoning, increases garrison squad's damage dealt by 9%. Sadly, you're not going to be using Liam on garrison for too long. Early game, putting him on the wall alongside Charlie, fairly effective, but by the time that enemies are hitting you, they're either so far outmatching you in research and troops, or you have better commanders to use on the wall that he's just not going to get a lot of use or effectiveness out of this particular skill. That being said, Liam is going to be your main pick on the wall until you get someone better. There are a lot of legendary commanders that can do this job better, but as far as Garrison, simply because he's going to be one of your highest levels, have access to more talents, better fleshed out in his skill tree, you're going to see Liam used alongside of Charlie or maybe Alex for a good majority of the early game until you get someone better. Otherwise, fairly straightforward attacker in the open field, can help clear out some of the zombies that you might be having trouble with until you've unlocked Russell and gotten him well skilled up. And in Arena, he's not a bad option to go ahead and max out his level if you don't have access to anyone else. Definitely get him to 40 so that you have the squad capacity to manage a lot of troops. And use him in Arena to try and get those equipment relics, the equipment materials early from Arena of Doom. And once you have those buffs and better commanders, you'll see yourself doing a lot better in Arena. That and this skill that he has for adventure does fairly well in the early game versions of the adventure, especially since the wall has an insane amount of HP. It's pretty hard to break. By the time that any of the enemies have been able to break it, the 5-second timer is over. You probably have some energy stored up. He's not a bad choice. He's honestly one of the more well-rounded epic commanders that you can get in this game. Now, as for talents, if you've seen me work with the skill tree at all before, you know that I love this skill. 10% chance to gain 120 rage when using basic attacks. It's Catherine's 4th skill on a talent tree. It's great. Having the additional rage from using skills and when using basic attacks is also essential to making sure that those skills get off as often as possible. Once that you've fully maxed this out, and I do mean fully, because the leader tree isn't as great, max out this, get the additional rage here, squad defense for 20 seconds, for 2 seconds after using a skill. This is nuts, especially after you've gotten all of those rage generation buffs. This 2 seconds happens quite a bit. These two are necessary. After that, I come over here and pick up the attack primarily for Arena of Doom because he will get below 50% in those kinds of events. I wouldn't suggest getting the rally capacity. You're not going to use him to rally. Either someone else can rally or you have better commanders to rally. Come over here, get your stat buff, be happy with that. I came down here and picked up additional stat buffs because I didn't want to be locked into using 3 different troop types by picking this. So I picked up a couple more points in squad defense. If you still really early game and you have him high level for whatever reason, picking this up will help because you'll get that additional, I believe it's 2% once you get the points in there. Yeah, an additional 2% squad defense when leading different troop types, but this is 1.5% regardless of that. Now, as far as pairs, early on, you're going to see him paired with Charlie, just because you get so much of their stuff for free that it's hard not to use them early game. Having said that, once you can find a better pair for Charlie, leaning into his damage is probably a better idea. He does have a nice squad attack, so he can help another heavy hitter to deal a bit more damage. And he works as a budget attack buff for other legendary commanders, such as Catherine, if you don't have Cynthia. I personally liked using Jaden with him for a while because of Jaden's defense debuff being paired into Liam's damage made them both fairly viable for single target damage and gave Jaden a bit more survivability that he really doesn't have. He has a little bit, but no. Otherwise, You can really use him with any good single target damage dealing commander and do fairly well. Park's not a bad option for the damage factor, the reduction in attack and defense for 2 seconds, leaning into Liam's damage. And again, he doesn't lock you into any particular troop type. So if you decide to go lean into ranged riders or infantry starting early, you can continue using Liam with whatever troop type that you want and still get really good effectiveness out of him. Surprisingly good effectiveness out of him. And with that, I know this was a bit of a shorter video, but there wasn't too much to talk about Liam. Hopefully this helped you understand how useful this epic commander can be for you in the early game if you use him correctly. And with that, this is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, signing off.